Welcome back. There's no debate that our eagerness to burn fossil fuels is causing major changes in the climate system, and that those changes have direct consequences, including more extreme weather events happening in the near future. But the feedback loops I mentioned earlier are going to create other massive changes too. Across the globe, scientists are now racing to understand and model Earth's complex, interconnected climate system to try to figure out just how damaging this rapid climate change will be in the next decades and what we can do to mitigate it. But the challenge is that predicting the future is difficult. For example, here are a couple of photos of me as a kid. Yeah. Would you have been able to look at them and then predict how I'd look today? Sure, there's a resemblance, but you wouldn't have been able to accurately predict whether I'd be tall or short, slimmer or larger, have long hair or be bald. We know that climate models work. Their predictions from the past have been shown to be pretty accurate for the present. But for the future, uncertainty remains, especially around how much CO2 humans are going to continue to emit. In order to calculate the uncertainty, scientists work in collaboration with the IPCC, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the famed body of volunteer climate scientists that since 1988 have chronicled humanity's persistent warming of the planet. Together, they formulated some scenarios for the prediction models. Scenarios that are then tested by Dr. Olivier Boucher and his team. Let's see how it works.
We're here again at the Pierre-Simon Laplace Institute in Paris, where Olivier and his team are working on scenarios that determine how much CO2 we will potentially emit.
Scenarios are basically stories of the future, which tell us how much emission of greenhouse gases we will emit up to the end of the century. And we don't work with one scenario, but with a range of scenarios so as to explore the full range of options into the future. So these are examples of scenarios here, from the most optimistic here to the most pessimistic here in terms of how much greenhouse gas emissions will be emitted into the atmosphere, but also in terms of different socio-economical contexts that basically take into consideration the evolution of the population, the type of economical development, whether it's more globalized or regionalized, whether it relies more on fossil fuels or renewables.
When the group of international scientists came together, they decided on 8 possible scenarios. In the most optimistic, carbon neutrality is achieved by 2050, meaning we emit as much CO2 as Earth can absorb. In the worst-case scenario, business and emissions go on as usual.
In the worst-case scenario, we can expect 4 degrees, maybe 5 or 6 degree warming as compared to pre-industrial, whereas in the best-case scenario, the most optimistic one, where we achieve carbon neutrality in about 2070 at the global scale or 2050 for industrialized countries, then we can stay under or about 2 degree warming relative to pre-industrial. But in any case, all these scenarios show some further warming in the next few decades. That's because there is a lot of inertia in the climate system. But what happens after 2040 or 2050 really depends on the actions that we take now to decrease the emissions of greenhouse gases.
We don't know which scenario will emerge. An increase of 2 degrees Celsius looks to be inescapable by 2040. But how we act now will determine what the climate will look like in 20 to 30 years' time.